What's up? Welcome to the channel, Detroit Poker. In this video, we're going to be talking about pocket jacks. What I've done is I've pulled a few hand histories from my live stream that I've been doing recently. It's my $100 to $1,000 online poker challenge. Let's just jump right into the first spot, okay? So in this spot, we're under the gun. Basically, we got one guy missing from the table. This is $10, no limit hold'em, 6 max. And I think what you'll find is the skill of the opponents and the tendencies are going to be similar to what you'd find at a live 1-2 no limit hold'em game. We're playing about 165 big blinds, and we're going to just make a standard raise, 3x in this case, but whatever the standard is at your live table, you could raise it to that amount. I generally standardize my raise size based on the game dynamics. We pick up villain number 1 here, who's playing a little shorter of a stack than we are. He's playing about 110 big blinds. And the action folds to the small blind here. Villain number 3, who is a little bit short, 81 big blinds. Villain number 3 is going to make the call. So, this is a common tendency you're going to see at 1-2 games is people cold calling, like raises and shit, and starting the call train, right? So the action's on villain number 4, and villain number 4 is going to put in a 3-bet here to $1.40. With pocket jacks here, we're kind of in an interesting spot. I think folding is out of the question. I think we can all agree that folding's out of the question. But what is the proper course of action? So I want you to just kind of think through the situation. If we call, what do we think will happen? So if I put this call in, more than likely, it's a good possibility both of these other opponents will call. It's going to complicate the situation. It's going to introduce these 2 other players in here. And that's where you'll find these spots where people are just in there with bullshit hands, and then you step in a landmine. And that's how it'll start, by letting these guys get into the hot pot here. So we're really kind of stuck in a tough spot by this dude putting the 3-bet in. Now let's talk about the option of if we 4-bet. So if we 4-bet, I think that's probably the best course of action in this particular case. For what it's worth, I'm not really thrilled about having to 4-bet like a passive opponent at these levels, because their 3-bet in itself is going to be pretty tight, right? The objective to 4-bet is to get calls from things that, we might be beating, say pocket 9s, pocket 10s, ace jack, ace queen, ace king, and it's debatable whether all that stuff is in his 3-bet range or not. This particular villain has a 21 VPIP, pre-flop raise of 18, and 3-bet of 7. So 7% 3-bet range. We're going to put in a 4-bet, and I think, generally speaking, 4-bet sizing is going to differ a little bit than 3-bet sizing. If I was to 3-bet this guy, I would probably do it 3.5x in position, 4x out of position. But in this case, I think 2.5x is a pretty good starting point for a 4-bet size. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to put in a 4-bet, $3.50. Something that I was already thinking of when I made this 4-bet is if this guy 5-bets off, then we just have to ask ourselves the question, is this guy capable of 5-bet with ace king or worse? You know what I mean? So this is kind of sketchy, to be honest, at these levels. But I think at a higher stakes where people would 3-bet wider, this is pretty standard. So action folds to villain number 4, and he does just make the call. So we're going to go heads up to this flop, in position, and the flop comes ace 10-7 with 2 spades and a diamond. So I think that you are probably on board with my thoughts. This is not a very good flop to be hitting in a 4-bet pot with pocket jacks. There is a lot of aces this guy could have. Ace king is the first thing that he could have. I suppose he could have some sort of ace queen, potentially. This guy starts out with a check, and the action's on us. What do we accomplish if we bet? I'm pretty sure that our opponent is probably going to have an ace here. So there's nothing else to do. We're just going to check back and try to pot control, and hopefully the turn is a jack. Good news for us, turn comes off, and it is a jack. And villain number 4 decides to place a bet for $3.10. So there's 2 things we can do here. Number 1 thing we could do is just call. But you got to ask yourself, if we just call, what if a queen comes off on the river? What if a king comes off on the river? What if a spade comes off on the river? Do you think these are good rivers, right? So, there's no reason for us to trap. This guy's putting a bet in for a little less than half pot. It's pretty clear that he probably has an ace, and he's value betting. And basically, this is not even a decision. You just move in. And, if we end up losing, it's whatever. It doesn't matter, right? But probably have the best hand here most of the time anyways. And I think that this guy will call with a worse hand. So he'll definitely call if he has ace king. He's not going to lay down ace king here. So put the jam in. Dude calls it off very quickly. So, what do you think this guy has based on what we've seen so far? Do you think ace king is a possibility? Do you think ace queen is a possibility? Do you think he might have a set of 10s? What hand do you think he's got? So let's go to the river. All the action is closed, and the river comes off at 3 of spades. We do show the pocket jacks, and our opponent shows ace king suited. So with that being said, we can move on to the next example. In this second example, we have pocket jacks again. We're pretty deep stacked, about 250 big blinds deep. And this table is pretty wild. Just kind of paint a picture. There's 2 opponents on this table, and one of these opponents is one of the ones that we're going to play this hand with. And both of these guys are playing a lot, a very wide range pre-flop. Mostly they're calling pre-flop, and they're showing up with bullshit cards, okay, when they're calling. We're going to get into the hand. We have pocket jacks, under the gun +1. Under the gun makes fold, so obviously we're going to come in for a pretty standard raise here. 3x. And we pick up villain number 5 here, makes the call, and started with a fresh 100 big blind stack. Villain number 6 has been calling a bunch pre-flop. We haven't really seen a whole bunch of 3-bets out of this guy. He's been just playing a lot of hands, but his 3-bet range is probably a little wider than most people, but I don't think he's going to be like way out there, right? He hasn't been 3-betting a whole bunch. Action folds around to us, and this is the first crucial decision point. We have a couple of things that we could do here. Obviously, we can make the call and go to the flop, and if we call, you gotta anticipate the action. If we make this call, this guy might come into the pot as well. Honestly, I think 4-betting might be a better course of action. If we put in a 4-bet, we could definitely charge hands that are like overcards or stuff that he 3-bet off just because he's in position, but I'm just not really sure what his 3-bet is. I'm not really sure how to proceed real time. If we did 4-bet and the guy called, that is a good situation, I suppose, but you got to think about we're going to navigate a bloated pot out of position versus a guy, and we're going to be fairly deep stacked or whatever. So we decided to call. So let's go down that rabbit hole of making this call. If you choose one course of action versus another pre-flop, it's going to change the course of the hand. And sometimes if you make what is considered to be a suboptimal decision before the flop, it's going to compound after the flop into a full-blown fiasco. But we'll see what happens in this case. So we make the call, and villain number 5 does make the fold. So we kind of luck out there that this guy didn't come along for the ride. And flops king 7-4, very dry. Obviously, we have second pair, and some of the range that would 3-bet off probably would get there, right? So we start out with a check, and villain number 6 checks through. From a hand reading perspective, I think if villain number 6 had a hand like ace king or potentially king queen, we would have probably heard from him right here. We probably expect a bet out of a hand like that. So this is kind of a little bit of a sign that maybe this guy doesn't have a king, right? So we go after the turn. It's another 7, and it does put a heart draw on board. We do have a heart as a blocker, which is sort of relevant. So in this particular case, we could bet, right? But if we get raised, we can't stand a raise. And I think the ideal course of action would probably be, as played, to just check and give this guy some room to, bluff worse hands or whatever, bet off with a flush draw if he has it. So we do make the check over to villain number 6, and villain number 6 puts a bet in. In this software, the Poker Tracker software, it includes the pot size, before the rake is taken out. But like in real time, this guy clicked pot and he hit bet. If I, rewind kind of like my mental database about the things that this guy's been doing, I've seen him bluff off a fair amount of times as pot size bets because he's gotten caught doing this. He could definitely have a bluff here, ace queen of hearts or something like that. So I think the course of action is probably just to call and reevaluate the river as played. So that's what we do. We make the call, and river comes off at 3. Well, it brings in one hand in particular. If the guy has 5-6 somehow, he just made a straight. I think it's very unlikely that that's the hand they would have, but it's a possibility. But the flush draw missed. We kind of didn't really think he had king X in his range. Unless he was trapping with top set. I guess that's a possibility. He could be trapping with top set. So we're going to start with a check here. So the guy just goes for, the super overbet. This is like 2x pot overbet. And this is a spot that's going to be very polarizing. And you'll probably find this spot at live tables. And what do you think we should do here? Before I tell you what I did, I want your opinion. You don't have to put it in the comments, but if you want to, make a comment about this particular spot. In real time, I thought that this guy's capable of making this bluff just based on the stuff I'd seen him doing before. And I decided to make the call. We're going to see the results of that in just a moment. But I want to talk about before we even show the results. this is something that I kind of know based on, my experience in low stakes and everything else, but rivers are extremely underbluffed spots, especially live 1-2 games, games like this, $10 no limit. People don't bluff rivers nearly often enough. Villain's going to show us 7-8 suited for 3 sevens. So he definitely got the full value on this one. And I think that a couple mistakes were made in this hand, and perhaps those of you watching this video can learn from these mistakes. If we go back, the fundamental mistake that I made in this hand was calling this river. And it's just because flat out rivers are underbluffed. These opponents just aren't capable of bluffing rivers like this. It's very, very unlikely that this guy would have a hand that we're beating on this river. And it doesn't really matter. Like, I've made worse calls than this in my life. And I've made calls like this in my life and been right, for what it's worth. So, you just keep on keeping on. You lose the hand, it's no big deal. But in real time, I was frustrated. And I wasn't frustrated that this guy got lucky on me. I was frustrated that I made a bad call. I felt like I made a bad decision. I felt like I played the hand wrong. I should have 4-bet pre-flop, blah, 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 blah. Hindsight is always 20/20. So definitely head over to DetroitPoker.net and take a look at my merchandise. There's also information about my coaching program over there. So take a look at some of my other content. It's right over there. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and click that alert bell so you receive updates every time I go live and or upload new content. Take it easy. Catch you on the flip side.